Welcome to Restoria. I'm Jenna, and this is your cozy corner for gentle bedtime stories. Each night, I'll share peaceful tales made to quiet your thoughts and guide you softly into sleep. So settle in, get comfy, and let the story carry you into rest. The story tonight is called The Quiet Chair, Chapter 1. First light, first fire. The cottage sits just past the last bend in the road, tucked beneath tall trees that lean in close, like old friends whispering. The stone walls are moss-touched and warm with memory. The windows glow gold even before the sun has fully risen. Lottie stands on the front step, suitcase in hand. The early morning air is cool and quiet, full of birdsong and the scent of damp earth. Her grandmother opens the door with a soft smile and a long hug that smells like chamomile and cedar. Inside, the air is warmer, not just from the fireplace, which hums gently in its stone hearth, but from the layers of time tucked into every shelf, every woven rug, every picture frame slightly tilted with age. You're just in time, her grandmother says. The kettle's thinking about boiling. Lottie sets her bag down and follows the familiar creak of the floorboards into the kitchen. The cottage is small, but every inch feels lived in and loved. The table is already set with 2 mugs, a jar of honey, and a plate of oat biscuits that still steam slightly. They sit and sip tea while the morning unfolds slowly outside. No rush, no noise, just the rustle of leaves and the steady warmth of being somewhere safe. After breakfast, her grandmother shows her the room upstairs, the same one Lottie stayed in last summer. The quilt on the bed is patched with soft blues and greens. The window looks out onto the trees. Lottie unpacks in no particular hurry. Sweaters in the dresser, books on the bedside table, a notebook tucked beneath her pillow. By the time she comes back downstairs, the fire has built itself up again, glowing low and steady. That's when she sees it. The quiet chair. It sits just beside the hearth, angled slightly toward the fire, covered in a faded quilted fabric, soft at the edges, sun-warmed in places. Lottie doesn't remember when it first appeared, only that it was always there. She crosses the room slowly and sinks into it. It's not like any other chair. It doesn't squeak. It doesn't shift. It just receives her like a held breath, slowly exhaled. The fire crackles once. A log shifts gently. Light dances across the stone. Lottie tucks her feet beneath her and closes her eyes. She doesn't sleep. She just rests. The chair hums with silence, the kind that isn't empty. It's full of stories, of warmth, of time, stretched thin and kind. Her grandmother walks past with a folded towel and pauses. "You found your seat," she says, like it's the most natural thing in the world. Lottie opens her eyes and nods. "I forgot how quiet it is." Her grandmother smiles. "That's the best kind of quiet, the kind that listens back." Outside, the sun lifts higher. Inside, the fire glows steady, and in the quiet chair, Lottie breathes out slowly, as if the whole world has paused just long enough to say, "You're home." Chapter 2. A day measured in quiet. The morning stretches gently. Lottie helps wash the breakfast dishes, warm water rising over her wrists as her grandmother dries with a checkered cloth. The window above the sink is open, letting in the scent of pine and the cool breath of forest air. They don't speak much. There's no need. Each clink of ceramic and soft fold of towel says enough. Afterward, Lottie pulls on her boots and a cardigan, and they step outside. The path behind the cottage leads into the trees, not far, just enough to be surrounded. Ferns lean in from either side. The ground is soft with last year's leaves. Birds call to each other like they're catching up after a long night. They walk slowly. Her grandmother stops here and there to point things out. A patch of mushrooms tucked under a log, the first tiny blooms of wood violets, a stone she swears has been in the same place since she was a girl. Lottie listens, nods, smiles. There's something about the forest that makes even simple things feel deep. When they reach the clearing with the mossy stump, they pause. Her grandmother pulls a thermos from her coat pocket and pours 2 small cups of cocoa, still warm. They sip and watch a squirrel race across a fallen tree. The world feels slowed down, not paused, just softer. On the way back, Lottie runs her hand along the bark of a tall birch, the white surface cool beneath her fingers. She pockets a smooth pebble and doesn't know why. When they return, her grandmother starts a stew for supper, onions and carrots, something green from the garden. The smell fills the house in warm waves. Lottie curls into the window seat with a book, though she barely turns the pages. The fire hasn't gone out. It never really does. Even when it's low, It hums in the background like a breath you don't have to think about. She watches the raindrops chase one another down the glass, listens to the creak of the old floorboards and the soft shuffle of her grandmother moving through the house. As the afternoon deepens, rain begins slow, soft, tapping the roof like fingers drumming on a drum skin. Lottie gets up, walks to the quiet chair, and sits. This time, she brings a blanket, not because it's cold, but because the weight feels like company. She watches the fire, watches the way it flickers against the stone, watches the way the shadows stretch and shift. Thoughts pass by, but none stay long. The chair doesn't ask her to think. It just holds her. Her grandmother walks in with 2 mugs of tea and hands one over without a word. They sit together, one on the couch, one in the chair. The fire crackles. The rain taps. They listen to the storm, to the old clock ticking, to the sigh of the wind slipping past the chimney. Lottie sips her tea and closes her eyes. And though nothing happens, no big story, no sudden change, something inside her settles, because not every day needs to be full to be meaningful. Some days are quiet, and that can be more than enough. Chapter 3, Stories by Firelight. The rain continues into evening. It doesn't pour. It lingers steady, soft, like a blanket being laid gently over the roof. Lottie and her grandmother eat supper with the lamps turned low, the bowls warm in their hands. The stew is simple, full of thyme and barley, and it tastes like something that's been waiting all day to be enjoyed. After the dishes are rinsed and the kitchen quiets, Lottie carries her mug of tea to the quiet chair. The fire welcomes her. She tucks herself in, feet curled beneath her, the blanket already waiting. The flames rise and fall with a gentle rhythm, casting gold on the stone walls. Her grandmother sits in the rocking chair across from her, a knitting basket in her lap, needles clacking softly. They sit without filling the air, just the sound of fire and yarn and rain. Then, did I ever tell you about the winter the river froze solid? Her grandmother asks, glancing up with a half smile. Lottie shakes her head, and so the story begins. It's not a loud tale, no danger, no rush, just a slow memory of skating in boots, of snow falling so quietly It felt like being inside a dream. Lottie listened, not just with her ears, but with her whole self. The chair helps. Somehow, it always has, as if it was built not just to hold a body, but to hold the listening part of you too. Her grandmother's voice blends with the crackle of the fire. Another story follows, then another, about summer storms, birthday pies, the cat who used to nap in the breadbasket. Lottie laughs softly at that one. The tea is gone before she notices. The fire burns lower, the knitting slows. The cottage grows even more still. Her grandmother sets the yarn aside and stands, stretching. Time for bed, I think, she says. Lottie stays a little longer, curled in the quiet chair, watching the last flames flicker. She doesn't want to move. Not yet, because in the small room, in the small house, something big is happening. A kind of remembering, a kind of returning. She traces a finger along the armrest where the fabric has grown thin, wonders how many other hands have done the same, wonders what stories the chair has heard and what it still holds in its soft, worn frame. The fire sighs, a single pop of ember. Outside, the rain begins to ease. She leans her head back and lets her eyes close. The warmth is steady, not just from the fire, but from the day, from the voices, from the room that holds her. And in the hush of stories and firelight, she feels not just comforted, but known. She rises only when the candle gutters low, carrying her empty mug, her blanket trailing behind like a shadow. Upstairs, the bed waits quilted and quiet, and the fire, though fading, burns just enough to say, "Good night, I'll be here when you return." Chapter 4. A quiet day inside. The morning brings grey skies and leftover rain. Drops bead on the window panes, tracing slow paths downward. The trees beyond the glass look softer somehow, their edges blurred by mist. The fire has been tended, the warmth steady, filling the cottage with a gentle hum. Lottie wakes late, not because she meant to, but because the house didn't ask her to do otherwise. The bed was too warm, the quilt too heavy with comfort. She dresses slowly and pats down the stairs in wool socks, the floor cool beneath her toes. Her grandmother is already at the table, a crossword puzzle open, and a cup of tea. steaming nearby. Could sleep? She asks without looking up. Lottie nods and pours herself a cup, adding just enough honey to turn the steam sweet. They eat toast and jam, quietly, the kind of breakfast that doesn't need conversation to feel full. Later, Lottie curls into the window seat with a book, legs tucked beneath her. The rain outside is soft and steady, like a lullaby. Her grandmother reads too, glasses perched low on her nose, occasionally reaching to adjust the logs in the fire. Time slows even further. No errands, no plans, just the steady rhythm of tea, pages turning, and firelight dancing. Mid-morning, Lottie dozes off where she sits, her book sliding slightly in her lap. She wakes to the scent of cinnamon and the clink of the kettle being set back on the stove. In the afternoon, they bake scones with dried cherries and cream. The kitchen fills with the scent of butter and vanilla. Lottie measures carefully. Her grandmother works by feel. They hum while they work different tunes, soft and overlapping. They eat the first one warm, straight from the tray, standing at the counter. The second with more tea at the table, watching the mist shift past the trees outside. Later, Lottie helps clean up, wiping down the counters, lining the remaining scones in a tin. Her grandmother places a square of parchment between each layer. By late afternoon, the cottage has settled again. The fire burns low and steady. The rain taps now and then, like it's remembering something. Lottie finds herself back in the quiet chair. The fire welcomes her like it always does. She doesn't bring a book. She just sits outside. The mist hasn't lifted. Inside, the hush holds steady. She leans back, lets her arms rest heavy on the armrests, her eyes soft on the shifting fire. Her grandmother passes through, wants to fold a blanket, wants to refill the wood basket. Each movement is unhurried. They exchange no words, just glances, just presence. And in the soft quiet of a rain-soaked day, Lottie doesn't feel stuck indoors. She feels held. Chapter 5. The memory in the quilt. The next day dawns brighter. The rain finally passed. Sunlight dapples the windowsills. The air smells like wet leaves and pine warmed by morning. Lottie stretches in bed, slowly pulling the quilt tighter around her shoulders. It's the same quilt she's always used here, a patchwork of faded blues and greens. stitched with tiny flowers. She runs her hand over one square, the fabric soft and almost silky from years of use. Downstairs, her grandmother is humming, something low and tuneless. The kettle begins to rattle as Lottie enters the kitchen. Eggs this morning, her grandmother says, already cracking one into the pan. The hens seem proud of themselves. They eat with the back door open, letting in the sound of the trees drying out. A breeze moves through the kitchen, carrying with it the scent of rosemary from the herb pot on the windowsill. After breakfast, Lottie asks about the quilt. Her grandmother smiles. That one's older than you. Bits of everything in it. They sit on the couch, the quilt spread across their laps. This one, her grandmother says, touching a square of faded flannel, came from your grandfather's old work shirt. Lottie traces the fabric gently. And this, my apron from the first house we lived in. It was yellow once. They go square by square, memory by memory. A summer dress, a baby blanket, a tea towel from a long-closed cafe, a curtain that once hung in the kitchen window. Each piece tells a quiet story. Lottie listens the way she does in a quiet chair, not just with her ears, but all of her. Her grandmother's fingers pause on one square near the center. This one's from the dress your mother wore on her first day of school. She cried the whole morning until I gave her a cookie to hold in her pocket. Lottie laughs softly. They sit for a long time, just tracing and remembering. The fire crackles faintly in the background. A clock ticks from the mantel, slow and steady. By the end, the quilt isn't just a quilt anymore. It's a map, a soft kind of archive, a stitched together proof that little things matter. That afternoon, Lottie takes the quilt with her to the quiet chair. The fire has already been lit, just a small flame, enough to dance. She wraps herself in its stories, leans back and lets the day unfold without needing to add anything more. Through the window, she watches a squirrel dart along the fence line. A bird dips into the bird bath and flutters out again. The chair holds her. The fire hums. The past drifts softly through the room like dust in sunlight. She doesn't need music or a book, just this quiet, just this warmth, just this quilt of memory wrapped around her. And for a while, Lottie feels completely still and completely connected. Chapter 6. A Walk Through the Stillness. The next morning is cool and clear. Lottie wakes to birdsong and a square of golden light stretched across her quilt. She dresses slowly, choosing her softest sweater and her well-worn boots. Downstairs, the house feels hushed, not empty, but listening. Her grandmother is out back, tending to something in the garden. A note on the table reads, "Went to check the raspberries. Join me if you like." Lottie pours herself tea and stands for a while at the window, watching the breeze stir the leaves. Then she steps out the door. The path to the garden is damp with dew. Everything smells of earth and green things. Her grandmother waves from beneath her wide-brimmed hat. "Plenty ripe," she calls softly. They pick raspberries in near silence. The berries fall into the basket with soft thuds. Lottie eats one now and then, the sweetness warm from the sun. Afterward, her grandmother says, "You should walk a bit. The woods feel different today." So Lottie does. She follows the familiar trail behind the cottage, where the trees arch overhead and the light filters down like lace. The forest is still damp from the recent rain. Everything smells more alive. Ferns glisten. A bird takes flight, its wings brushing the air with a whisper. She walks slowly. There's no hurry, just the soft sound of her boots on the path, the occasional snap of a twig. In a small clearing, she finds a patch of sunlight and stops. She sits on a mossy stone and listens, not for anything in particular, just to what's already there. The rustle of branches, the hush of wind, her own breath, even and light. And in that moment, Lottie feels as if the whole forest is keeping still with her, not waiting, just being. She stays until the light shifts, then makes her way back home. And when she steps inside, the fire is already glowing. The quiet chair waits, and the stillness she found outside follows her in soft as moss, deep as breath. Chapter 7. Firelight and the Familiar. Evening comes early. The sun dips low behind the trees, casting long shadows across the living room. Lottie lights a candle on the mantel and watches the flames settle. Outside, the breeze quiets. Inside, the fire begins to build itself again. Her grandmother knits by the window. The soft click of needles is steady and calm. Dinner is simple, a warm lentil stew and thick slices of bread with butter. They eat together with few words, just shared glances and the occasional smile. Afterwards, they each bring a cup of tea into the living room. Lottie settles into the quiet chair. The fabric greets her like an old friend. Tonight, she brings her journal. She doesn't write in full sentences, just fragments, words that feel like they belong together. Moss, hush, golden light, spoon tapping porcelain. Her grandmother looks up. What are you writing? Just pieces, Lottie says. Little things that feel like this place. Her grandmother nods. That's all a story really is. Just the pieces you keep. The fire shifts, sending sparks curling up the chimney. They sit quietly for a long while. The room holds them not in silence, but in something softer. Lottie continues writing. Quilt corners, cinnamon, pine needles crushed underfoot, steam on the window. She pauses between each word, not to think, but to feel. Your mother used to sit right there too, her grandmother says, nodding toward the jet. She liked reading mostly, always with her knees tucked up. Lottie smiles. So, it's a chair for tucking in, a chair for resting, her grandmother says, holding whatever you need to hold. The teacups empty slowly. The candle burns lower. Shadows stretch into corners. Lottie closes her journal and sets it on the side table. She leans back and listens to the fire, to the settling house, to the steady breath of someone nearby who has always felt like home. Her grandmother dozes off mid-row of knitting, the yarn slipping gently from her lap. Lottie doesn't wake up. She just watches the fire. The scent of cedar, the soft weight of the quilt in her lap, the flicker of firelight on stone. These are the pieces she'll keep, and the quiet chair holds them all, not as memories, but as present. Still happening, still warm, still here. Chapter 8. Before the fire goes out. The next morning is her last. Lottie wakes early, drawn from sleep by the hush before sunrise. The window glows pale, and the world outside is wrapped in a soft fog. She dresses without hurry and makes her way downstairs. The fire is still burning, low, steady, just enough to keep the room warm. Her grandmother is already there, sitting in the rocker with a cup of tea and a small smile. "No rush," she says. "Everything you need will wait for you." They share a quiet breakfast. Toast with marmalade, a boiled egg, slices of apple. Afterward, Lottie moves to the quiet chair one more time. She sits slowly, presses her hand to the fabric, wraps the quilt around her shoulders. The fire pops, once a single ember rising. She doesn't speak, neither does her grandmother, but their silence is full of the week they share, of rain on the windows, of bread and stories and warm raspberry mornings, full of what isn't said, because it doesn't need to be. Lottie closes her eyes for a moment. When she opens them, the fire is lower, the light is stronger, the day is beginning. She stands and folds the quilt neatly across the back of the chair. Her suitcase waits by the door. Her grandmother hugs her tight. "Come back when you need to," she whispers. "The chair will be waiting." Lottie steps onto the porch. The air is fresh and bright. The trees sway gently, saying goodbye in their quiet way. She looks back once. Through the window, the quiet chair sits beside the fire, still, soft, sure, and even as Lottie walks away, she carries it with her. Not just the chair, not just the warmth, but the quiet, the way it feels to be held, the knowing that wherever she goes, that stillness lives in her, now steady as flame, and always there before the fire goes out.